So by now you've gotten that we don't look objectively at reality. We look subjectively. We look through our tainted glasses, tainted by our thoughts, tainted by our emotions, tainted by our beliefs, tainted by the words we say to ourselves, tainted by our habitual habit patterns. That's how we come to an event. That's how we come to look at the world. So we don't actually look at it in reality. And hence that's why we do the reframe, so that we can at least come to life with an objective perspective. And so really the objective here is that we want to develop clarity and objectivity when looking at our lives, rather than just simply interpreting events and circumstances through what are really murky waters of our own distorted thoughts, emotions, beliefs, and feelings. We want to strive to see the reality of what's really going on, so we can get an accurate understanding of, like I say, what's real, what's really going on here. And so this is what we've got to strive for. And notice I say strive for, because it's not easy. You can't just dive in and say, okay, from today I'm going to just become real. You've got a whole lot of baggage that you bring to the table. So the idea is to use the reframe model as often as possible to bring us to a place of reality, of what's really going on here, that we can accurately understand to the best of our ability. So we want to strive to see the reality of what's happened in the past. Because what's happened in the past, while it feels real, while it seems real, may not be real. It's just a memory. It's just a memory. And we know that the memory has power because we've attached meaning to that. So we want to strive to see beyond the murky waters of our thoughts, beliefs, emotions, self-talk, which have really been created by our past meanings. So what do we do? Well, we have to find a way to tune in to our bigger self, our higher self, our adult self. And that said, then we've got to ask that higher self, that adult self, to give us the courage to stand up for our truth and address difficult situations as they come up. So rather than we distance ourselves or we get aggressive, so we're going to fight or flight or freeze or fawn, and we pretend we don't see the real problem, because let's face it, it makes us uncomfortable. It creates tension within us. And when we have the tension, the first thing we want to do is to squish it down, push it back. And so what it causes us to do is to bring to the table all of our compensating behaviors, because we don't want to look at the truth because there's too much tension today. Now, this is all happening unconsciously, of course, but what's happening in reality is we're not seeing things for what they are, we're seeing things for who we are. And so we're trying to resolve our reaction to the event, the circumstance, based on our past programming, our domestication, our emotions, our expectations, our assumptions. And what that does is it forces us to rely on old compensating tendencies, which, as I said, which is in some way, fashion or form to either fight, to flight, to fawn, to freeze, in all different permutations of that. And that's what we bring to the table. So as I said before, we don't see the world as it is. We're not looking at the truth of what it is. We see it as who we are. Do you get that? We don't see the world as it is. We're not looking at it as purely factual, black and white. We see it as we are. In other words, we're bringing ourselves and all our stuff to the party. And we're looking at things through that view. Okay? And so this is why we just get ourselves into a mess, if you like. And so rather than distance ourselves and pretend that we don't see the real problem because it makes us uncomfortable, when we feel that tension, rather than just push it to one side or push it down or run away, we step into it and we face it. And this requires us to step into our adult and not bring the child to the party. It's a bit like the story of the emperor's new clothes. I mean, really, the story is all about this vain emperor who, was obsessed with his appearance and wearing extravagant clothing. And it just so happens that, a couple of swindlers or con men arrive in the city and they claim to be able to weave the most magnificent fabrics, which just happen to be invisible to anyone who, by the way, is either stupid or unfit for their position. Well, who's going to admit to that, right? So the emperor hands over a large sum of money and they're going to make him an outfit, and they go to work, or at least they go to pretend to work. They've set up this huge big loom and they start making this invisible clothing, and the emperor sends his advisors to check on the progress. And again, none of them want to admit that they can't see fabric, fearing that they're going to be seen as either unfit or stupid. And the same thing when the emperor goes down to see it for himself. And so, there's great elaborate preparations on the day that the con men dress him up in his new garments so that he can march in the parade, and he marches completely naked. And it's only when a child shouts out, "Hey, the dude's not wearing any clothes." And then gradually people began to wake up and actually acknowledge the truth. However, the story goes that the emperor was reluctant to accept the truth, and he holds his head high and he continues on with the procession. And that's what we do. Even though we have a truth staring us in the face, we just avoid it. We run away from it. We defend it. And so, yes, while this is just a children's tale, there's so much truth in it. What's your emperor's new clothes? Where do you get so bought into an idea, which is not necessarily true? It's just an idea based on your past experience. It's just an idea. And you get so bought into it, and even when it's revealed as maybe not what is, we still hang in there. We still own it. We still fight for it. What's your emperor's new clothes? And what are you bringing to the table? The emperor's new clothes is a story that's often cited for situations where people are afraid to critique those in power or those who have perceived power. And that, by the way, could be your spouse, a friend, your boss, or where people fail to see what is literally right in front of them due to social pressures or personal biases. And this is the power of this incredible story, which, by the way, was written in the early 1800s. But we need to be able to see our lives more deeply. We need to be able to step away from our thoughts, our emotions, our beliefs, and dispassionately, if you like, and look at the issue from the point of view of objectivity, then come up with a resolution without blame, judgment, projection, assumptions, and expectations. Because all of those, the blame, the judgment, the assumption, and the expectation, they all cloud our judgment. They all bring a lack of objectivity to the table, and so we can't see really what's in front of us. We make it up. And if we make it up, then it's not real. which is why we get ourselves into a horrible mess in the first place. So this requires us to step into our adult, to step up, to step into the bigger who we are, as opposed to being the child and bringing the child into the picture. Because remember, the child is defensive. The child is struggling with its core wounds, and that's what's coming to the table. So we want to bring the adult into the room. And that takes courage. That takes will to step in rather than avoid. Okay, so what do you do? What do you do? How do you get a grip? How do you bring your adult into the room? How do you see things objectively? You have to use the tool of reframing. You've got to build this tool into a skill where every time you hit a wall, every time you hit a roadblock, you pull out your reframe tool and you do a reframe that brings you back into the present moment, that brings you back to the facts. And from there, you can make clear, clarified decisions that are at least somewhat objective, even if they're not completely objective. You've removed the subjectivity of your emotions, of your judgments, of your feelings, of your thoughts, of your thought patterns. Bring yourself back to reality by using the reframe. This is not a skill that you just develop overnight. Yes, you've got the process. Yes, you've got the tool in front of you. So you really got to get the hang of it. It's like driving a motor car. After a while, it just becomes automatic. You just use it automatically. Even if it's a manual car and it took you ages to learn how to shift gears, eventually you get it. And one day you find yourself driving to work and you don't even know how you got there because you were on autopilot. And it's the same thing with the reframe process. The more you use it, the more it becomes a part of you. The more you step into your strength, into your power, and it allows you to stay focused on what it is you want and doesn't keep you looking at what it is that you don't want. This is where your power is. This is where your power is.